In this lecture, we're going to consider version control, learn the basics of what it is, and then discuss just a little bit of how it can be used in the software development and maintenance process. So we'll start out by looking at the motivation, by considering, have you ever lost work by deleting a file that you thought you no longer needed, and as soon as you hit that delete button and you deleted it out of your recycle bin, then you realize that you needed that file? Or you've overwritten or deleted code in part of a document because you thought you no longer needed it, and as soon as you did, you wish that you never did because you come back later and wish you had that code, or you needed to reinsert that functionality back into your software, or just accidentally deleted something that you needed. And each one of these instances, once this happens, we want the ability to undo what we just did. Now, thinking about some more motivation here, as you're working on whether it's a report or even a software project, have you ever named a project or report with several different file names? For example, MyDoc, MyDoc version 2, MyDoc version 3, maybe used dates, so MyDoc 2/22/12, or if you've been working on some type of document with several different people, you may then come up with a naming scheme, something like report, report John's edits, report Mary's edits, report combined, where you're then trying to manage all these different versions of this document to help you keep up with the changes and then integrate them into one single document. So this is where version control comes in. What it does is it helps you undo changes if you give something up. It helps you view a history of the changes that you have made, so you can go back to a previous version and see how your document or your code has evolved over time. And then it allows you to collaborate with others without the danger of overriding another person's changes. And so version control can be very helpful for any type of application that you're working on, or even if it's just a report that's going to be evolving over time and you're working with other people. For purposes of this course, we're just going to focus on the first two, learning how to use version control so that we can actually roll back to a previous version if you needed to, and view the history of the changes and keep up with various versions of our software. We'll leave this last one for a later time. You'll probably learn actually later in the program, probably in the software engineering course, on how to collaborate with others using version control. So if we come in and have a definition of this, version control is just a program that helps track and maintain file changes. Some other names that you may hear it as source control, you may hear it as source code control, you may hear it as revision control. Now, when you get into version control, there are going to be a lot of new words that you're going to run into that are very specific to working with version control. You may hear the word cloning, pull, push, merge, rollback. There's a lot of terminology that you need to become familiar with. My suggestion is, one, you don't have to know all the terminology and all the features of version control out of the gate. You just need to know some basic ones, and then as you use it, you will begin to learn about some more of the features and some of the terminology. I'm going to touch on two definitions that you do need to know out of the gate when you're starting to work with version control. One of those is the working directory. You may hear it also as a working set or the working copy. These are the copy of the files that are on your own system, within your own file system, to which you are editing and making changes. And you would go through and you would modify these as any other document that's on your system. So that's known as your working directory. This is the active set of files that you're working on and modifying. Then there's a repository. This here is the database that's going to store all your files and track the history of the changes along with any comments you've made as you have checked in those changes. Every time you check in a change, or you may hear the word commit, it makes a new revision of your project's working directory. And so that revision then is just what version a file was on. So it's like taking a snapshot in time. When you commit a file, this is what the file looks at that time. Each version may also be referred to as a change set. And depending on what version control system that you're using, the terminology may vary just a little bit. There are several different version control systems out there. We are going to be using Mercurial, which is a distributed version control management system. And for now, we're just going to be focusing on managing your own changes on your own system. The distributed aspect of using Mercurial for having multiple members working on a project will be saved for later in the program. However, if you want to look into the distributed aspect of this, you can use bitbucket.org. I actually encourage you, once you understand the basics of this, that even for an individual project, you can store your work, your repository out in Bitbucket. And that way you've got automatic backup of your system going on. Now to use Mercurial, there is a executable that you can install. It's called Tortoise HG. The HG stands for Mercury, which is just a Windows shell extension to Mercurial that you can use within Windows Explorer on your system. And so this program is very useful to help you track changes for any type of project that you're working on. It just doesn't have to be a software project. It may be some type of report that you're working on. It could be a website that you're working on. And so you can use Mercurial right within your own system without it actually being a software project. Now for our software projects for Java using Eclipse, there's a plugin called Mercurial Eclipse that will need to be installed, and it helps you actually track your changes, do all your checking into the repository right within Eclipse. So I'm going to do a demo here. First, we're going to look at using Tortoise HG with Windows Explorer, and then we'll move on to looking at using it within Eclipse. So as I come here, I have a directory. And right now I don't have any files in here. But if I want to take all the files within this directory, and it could even be subfolders within this directory, and begin tracking them using VersionControl. So the first thing I need to do is set up a repository. So I can come in here and do a right click to bring up my context menu in the Windows Explorer, come down to Tortoise HD, and say create repository here. I can just click on create, accept all the defaults here. It creates that. Now it's going to create a directory and a file here. It creates the HD ignore, which is a file used if you want to ignore any files and placed in your repository. And there's an HG directory here which keeps track of all your changes. Now I can come in and make a new document. So I'm just going to make here a new Microsoft Word document. We'll call it my report. Then I will come in here and edit this report here. So I'm going to call this like my first draft. I save this. Then I can come back out here to my folder here where my file is located. I can click on that, go down to Tortoise HG, and then I can say I want to add this file to my repository. So I can click on Add File. It then brings up a dialog that lets me select what file I'm adding. I've already selected that, so I can say add that particular file. It's a binary file, which just means we won't be able to see the internals of the particular file within VersionControl system. So I'm going to click on Add. When I click on Add, notice here that it puts a little plus symbol out here. So this means that that file's been added to the repository. But what we haven't done is actually committed or checked that file into the repository. So this actually hasn't saved a version of this file within the repository yet. Once I've got my file in the state where I actually want to check in a particular version of it, I come in, right click to bring up the context menu on the file, and I come down to HD commit. Again, that brings up a dialog where I can now put in some comments to help me track my history for any changes that I'm checking into my repository. So I'm going to say initial draft of the report. Then I was click on commit. When I do that, notice here it creates a change ID, or you may hear it as a change set ID, which is a unique ID for each commit you have made when you do a check-in or a commit for a particular file. So now I can hit close. Now notice here I've got a big check mark there. That means that that file has been committed to the repository and is in sync with it. So the file here and the one that's in the repository are identical. Now, if I come back to my report, say my first draft, let's type in here, adding edits for my second draft. I save that. If I come back out to my Windows Explorer, notice here after I've saved it, it puts a red exclamation point up here. That indicates that my current version of the file within my working set differs from the corresponding file that's in my repository. If I want to then say I've got my file in a state that I want to do a commit on it, I can come here, right click on it, go down to HD commit. I want to then to actually put a message in here, a comment for what changes have been made. So then I can say in here, second draft, or whatever the comment may be. Hit commit. Notice here, it now has a different change set ID for the commit that I just made. I can hit close on that. Now, once I've checked in several versions of that, I can come back and look at my version history. And to see that for the file that I'm on, I can right click and click on Towards HD and say, look at revision history. This now brings up a dialog that's going to let me see all the versions of this file that I've checked in, that I've committed. And so here, notice that there's 2 revisions I've checked in. It has my comment that I made when I checked it in, and it puts them in the order. If I wanted to roll back to a previous version, maybe I deleted something and I need to go back and see that again, what I can do is right click on that and then say revert back to that particular revisions. So this log viewer is very helpful in keeping track of my revision history. As I come back here and look at my file explorer, remember this folder here, this .hg folder, is my actual repository. So if I came in and accidentally deleted this folder here, I have lost my entire repository, which means I've lost all my version control for my file. So this is why it's actually recommended that you would use a distributed version control and store your repository out in a server like Bitbucket. So that way it's always out there, it's in an external place, and that's going to be backed up, and you don't have to worry about that. If you came in here and your own system actually accidentally deleted something, that you know that it's going to be available out on a server that's backed up nightly. One other item that I want to demo here is using tags, which can help you give a more meaningful name to a particular revision that signifies something of importance. For example, maybe you've worked on your report and now it's in the state that you're ready to turn it in, and so you want to say like assignment turned in, or it's a paper for a conference and you want to say label it as this is the one that was turned in. So to do that, we can actually bring up the HD workbench. We get another view where we can actually see our revision history. Let's say that I actually want to take this version here, which is version 1, which was the second draft that I checked in. I want to add a tag to that. To add a tag, I can come and do a right click and click on tag. And then I can give it a name, and maybe I'll say submitted as assignment 8. And then add that tag. Now that has added, I'll hit close there, that has added now a tag in here that's going to give a more meaningful name for that particular revision within my repository. So if we're working on software, we may come in and tag all our files to be, for example, version 1.1 of our software, version 1.5, so at any time we can come back and roll back and see the changes that occurred in our system at that particular time. So I encourage you, when you get to a significant point for whatever files that you're tracking, to use tags to give a more meaningful name to denote key milestones for your files that you're using within the version control system. Remind you of just a couple things, and then we'll look at a demo within Eclipse. Remember, add versus commit. When you add and commit, there are 2 different operations. So add means you want the file to be within the repository, but it hasn't been there yet. So added files will not be tracked in the revision history until they are committed. If you're going to want to check in a new version of the file, you need to go through the process of committing. When you commit or check in, it uploads your current version of the file to the repository. And once they've been committed, then you have the ability to go back to that particular version. As a reminder, a tag is just a user-defined label to help you more easily reference a particular revision. For example, release 1.5, release 1.8. I encourage you to use tags when you hit significant milestones for your particular files that you're using within your repository. The last thing I want to do is do a demo within Eclipse of using Mercurial. So I'll bring up Eclipse. I have already created a Java project. It's just a simple little project. To use Mercurial or version control within Eclipse, you click on the project, and the first thing you need to do is actually create a repository. So when I come in here, I have Mercurial demo. I do a right click to bring up the context menu, and I come down, and there's actually, let me scroll this up so we can see it. Right click, there is a team menu item. I click on that, and I click on share project. Share project means I'm going to create a repository. The repository type is going to be Mercurial. I click on next, click on finish. It has now gone out, and in the directory where the Mercurial demo project is stored, it has created a .hd directory, which is going to be my Mercurial repository for version control. Now notice here, it puts some little icons up here. This means that there's a repository, but these files are not yet checked in. There's a discrepancy or a difference between your current working set here and what's in the repository. And of course, right now, we don't have anything in our repository. So the next thing that I need to do is do a right click, come down to team, and notice once I've created the repository, I have all the functionality of working with my repository available. So the next thing that I can click on here is we can do a straight commit without going to add. If we went to add, then we'd have to go through and do the commit right after that. But if we just do a straight out commit, it's going to automatically add all the files to our project. So I'll click on commit. It brings up a dialog, and I'll say initial version of my project. Then I need to select what files I want added. We'll select the class path, we'll select the project, and we'll select our source file. We won't worry about any setting files being stored in our repository since they're specific to Eclipse. Then I'll click OK. When I do that, notice here we're going to get some changes in our icons here. We get this little gold rectangle, which means that this file is the current version of the file in your working set is identical to that which was in your repository. Notice here that we do have a star. What that's meaning, there's a file here that is not within our repository, and that's because we didn't check in the settings file. If I come back and let's say I have made some changes, so I come in here and I want this to say hello Bob. Notice here now there is a little change in my icon saying that there's been a modification to your file, so it's not the same as that which is in your repository. If I want to come in and check in my changes now, I can come in and say, go down to team and commit, and we'll say changed greeting. Here, the only thing that we've changed is just this file, so that's all that we're going to check in. Now, once I have done that, notice that it's saying that it is now in sync. My working set and my version control for this file are now in sync. I can come in here, go down to team, and say show history, and then that's going to bring up this dialog here. where I can come in and see all my change set IDs for each version that I've come in. I can see the history comment, summary comment that I used when I checked it in. I can then even come in here, and when I click on one of these versions down here, I can get a view which will show me the difference between that version and the version right before it. And I can end up comparing different versions within my version control. So if I came in here and I looked at these, I can see hello Bob, hello world. So I can even see in this case, because they're actual text files, what the actual differences were within version control system. So this is a very useful tool to help track the changes. So that's just a quick overview of how you can use the version control within Eclipse. Remember to get to that at any particular time. I do a right click on the file or the project, go down to team, and then I can see the various options that I have available. You'll get some more practice with this in the homework exercise for this particular week. So what have we covered? We've covered the ability to create and add files to a repository, commit changes to a repository, and then learn how to tag a repository. Again, later on in the program or on your own, you'll learn how to publish your changes to a central server, for example, Bitbucket. I do encourage you may want to investigate that on your own. You'll learn how to share repositories with others, and then there are a lot of other features that can be explored within version control. What you'll see as we start working on our software, when we get it to key milestones, that is what we're going to want to do is check in those files into our repository. So this is where we get into the software maintenance process, that as we're developing or as we've released our product and we need to come back and modify it, whether that's correcting any bugs or faults in our system and improving the performance somehow of our system or adding new functionality, is that we're going to want to check those changes into our version control system so we can monitor and track how our system has evolved over time. And so we want to use our version control both for our initial system development and then also our maintenance of that software product after we have released that out to the public. So version control is a vital part in helping navigate the software maintenance process as our product evolves over time. That is all I'm going to cover in this lecture on version control and in the assigned readings. And as you work with this on your own, you'll learn about some more of the capabilities of version control.